What's going on, Professor Marandi, with the concept? I know that you follow many of these posts on X, and you know what's going on generally, the atmosphere, and it seems that the Zionist movement tries to picture the situation with what's going on in the West Asia as though the Islamists, as they call it, they want to capture, to reshape the whole West. They're somehow attacking the West. They want to reshape the West. And here is the British commentator, Melanie Phillips, talking about that. I want to know your take on what she's trying to picture for the people in the West.
Why is all this happening? Well, I think that the Palestine cause is absolutely central. The Palestine cause, as we all know here, is based on nothing other than the destruction of the Jewish state, but more than that, it is also based on stealing the Jews' own history in the land from them. But the Palestine cause has become the cause of causes in the West, which of course is in the business of destroying its own core values which come from Judaism. No coincidence. In my view, the Palestine cause is a form of holy war, Islamic holy war, and it is a Trojan horse for the Islamization of the West. By adopting the language and the moral inversion of the Palestine cause, the West has bought into the agenda for its own destruction at the hands of Islam. This is a death wish by the West. And if you have a death wish, you cannot fight a death cult, which is what the West is facing in the forces of Islam. It cannot fight it because it no longer knows what it is. The West no longer has the will to defend itself because it no longer knows what that means. And insofar as it ever knew what it means, it has tried to destroy it by telling itself that the West is to be hated. This has
Yeah, you get the tone, what she's talking about.
Uh,
How
you know,
do you understand the way that they're trying to say that this Islam is attacking us? We have to do something, but we are, the state of Palestine is on the way. Is blocking that sort of attack. That's why it's necessary to support Israel. How do you understand it, Professor Marandi?
Nima, um, when the Israeli regime was forced to leave Lebanon in the year 2000, after 18 years of occupation, 18 years of occupation, those who are impatient about resistance today, they should go back and take a look at history and see how long it took for Hezbollah to push this regime out of Lebanon. 18 years. After the year 2000, I went with a group of students, University of Tehran students. There were 9 of them, and I think maybe 5, 6 professors. We went to we went to a conference in Lebanon, but then we also visited southern Lebanon. We went to the town or the city of Khiam, and we went to the prison. In that prison, we met one of the former prisoners. And he said, in front of all of us, in front of men and women, he said that they raped his wife in front of him. They brought his wife to the prison, raped her in front of him to force him to give information. And the person who carried out the rape was Lebanese. Okay? When the prisoners were liberated, because the Israelis just quickly left Lebanon and left the prisons, and the prisoners came out, the martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah called on his supporters not to seek revenge against anyone who was working with the enemy and lives in Lebanon. This former prisoner told us that I see this rapist every now and then because he lives in the South. And of course, he has deep feelings about what happened. But he said, don't even think about it, because that's what Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah wanted, because he wanted Lebanon to be calm. He wanted Lebanon to remain united, stable, calm. So he was looking at the bigger picture. And this woman talks about Islam in that way. The Islam that she is talking about is actually the Islam that the intelligence agencies that she is in love with, Mossad, the CIA, the Turkish intelligence agency, Qatari intelligence agency, the NATO intelligence agencies, and the oil and gas rich, all other oil and gas rich regimes that are bound to the United States, the Islam that they produce, the Takfiri Islam, the Islam of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the Islam that the United States uses in its proxy wars, whether it's in Afghanistan or in Syria or in Libya or elsewhere. So, and this is something that we've been seeing a great deal, and it comes from the Zionists, whether Christian or Jewish. That some, they speak of the Judeo-Christian values, even though we see how in Palestine Zionists insult Jesus. For Muslims, on the other hand, Jesus is infallible. He is, a chapter in the Holy Quran is named after his mother. We would fight for him. We saw how the resistance in Lebanon and Iraq, they fought to save the Christians, among others. And by the way, when I visited Iraq during the war, I went and met a Christian commander of the Popular Mobilization Forces. In their own regions where they were Christian, they had their own forces, and the guards and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces and the Iraqi army were working with them. So while the West was supporting these Takfiri groups, NATO and their regional partners, the resistance was supporting the Christians. And recently I saw something said twice, apparently, by Tucker Carlson, when he said he's rightly very critical of the Israeli regime. But one thing that he said is that the Israeli regime is not Western. It doesn't abide by Western values. He said it's Eastern and it's Asian, and they have blood guilt or collective punishment, or people are born guilty uh, in those cultures. But it's the exact opposite. And we do not have blood guilt or collective punishment. We do not have, people are not born guilty. In fact, in Islam, we don't even have the concept of original sin. So, and therefore, these narratives that are created by Zionists are basically to keep people divided, to keep people hostile toward exactly what they did through Wahhabism in our region. These intelligence agencies bound to the West in Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others for decades. They used sectarianism, racial hatred to keep the region divided. Now that divide is being washed away because the reality is clear to everyone who has open eyes, that it is only the resistance that is supporting the Palestinian people and no one else. Now they're fearful that since Europeans and Americans are turning against the Israeli regime, they're fearful that Muslims and Christians would move closer to each other. So they try to create um, this deep divide between the two sides and fabricate some sort of animosity. So, who was it that saved the Christians in Syria before the Al Qaeda came to power? Who saved the Syrians in Iraq? It surely wasn't the Western armed forces. It surely wasn't the Israeli regime who bombed Christians in Gaza and who murder Christians in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank. And by the way, the same. So for Muslims, Christ is king, and Moses is king. I mean, the what is extraordinary is that they speak of Judeo-Christian values, yet the treatment that we have in occupied Palestine of Christians is clear to everyone. But no one is, even though Muslims consider Moses to be uh, an infallible prophet, and Jesus, as I said before, when they have such a status in Islam, but you would expect that there would be some talk of common values. But these people, they have a vested interest in divide, just as these oil and gas rich dictatorships have a vested interest in sectarianism. These have, because they have no legitimacy, they're dictatorships and they're bound to the West. These the Zionist regime, they have a vested interest in religious hatred, and their focus is on dividing Christians and Muslims, and Jews and Muslims. But the fact is that Iran, which is the center of the axis of resistance, Iran has Jews and Christians. Iran has a Jewish MP in accordance with the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it has multiple Christian MPs in accordance with the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran. A while back, I think you probably heard that online there was a lot of news about an Iranian metro station named Saint Mary, the mother of Jesus, the mother of Christ. It it didn't make any great news here because for us it's natural to have such a metro station, especially since it's right nearby the most important Armenian church in Tehran. But for for people outside of Iran who've been bombarded by Western propaganda for decades, anti-Iranian propaganda, anti-Muslim propaganda, anti-Shia propaganda, anti-resistance propaganda, for many it was a big surprise. But it shouldn't be. For why would we be have any hostility towards Christians? We have no hostility towards Jews. We consider Jews who've been standing up against Israel as heroes, and many of them travel to Iran. Many of them have visited Iran, and as I said, we have Jewish Iranians who have, despite the attempts by the Israeli regime to convince them to leave Iran, they haven't. They've stayed put.
Actually, I don't want to make it it's somehow a religious talk, but Professor Marandi, the Muslim, when we talk about the Muslim in Quran and in the Holy Quran, they're talking about Muslim as Ibrahim and Ismail, as we call it in Persian, or Abraham and Ishmael. They both were called Muslim in Quran. It shows
Yes.
how, the concept is not just trying to isolate the Muslims. They're trying to show that how this community is, it's tries to embrace other people, different from, Christians, Jews. It's not just separating people from each other, it's connecting people to each other.
You see, this goes, I think, I want to sort of build a bridge between what you're saying and what this woman said, and also what the former speechwriter of Obama said recently, in which I'm sure you saw. Basically, what she was saying is that when Jewish kids at school see reality on their cell phones, and so they don't believe our narratives anymore. And what is the solution? To take away the reality, to take away the cell phones, right? This shows two things, by the way. One is that it shows that they're admitting young Jews, school children, look at them with disgust. She used the word something like that uh, when they speak, when they try to repeat these narratives after they've witnessed all the horrific crimes that they've carried out. It shows that Jews do not think like the woman uh, who wrote for Obama, nor this woman who calls this some sort of death cult. And the second is that both these women are trying to do the same thing, and that is try to impose these fake narratives in the face of reality, and it's not going to work because every day they're tearing children apart. In fact, the stupidity of the Israeli regime is that it violates the ceasefire every day in Lebanon and in Gaza, because every day people across the world are being reminded that this Holocaust continues, that the genocidal regime is as bloodthirsty as it was before, and it keeps people awake. It's painful to see the extermination of families in Gaza uh, take place, the murder of some these Zionists, and Western journalists come in. A Western journalist spoke to me and said that I said they're violating the ceasefire every day, and the journalist said, "Well, they say these are Hamas and Hezbollah." And I said, "It's a ceasefire. What does that have to do with anything?" As if for them, killing people is legitimate even during a ceasefire. If it's Hamas and Hezbollah, then that's not a ceasefire. So, and I kept having to repeat this to the journalist. I probably said it 4 or 5 times to get it into that person's thick skull. But it's like they're so deeply entrenched in these narratives that they just can't see reality, or they don't want to see reality. I once had a student who plagiarize heavily, and then I'm sure you have similar examples. And this was a few years ago before you have to Google and check sentences and things like that. And I found a lot of plagiarism. And then that student came to see me, and I said, "Look, what is this?" And the student kept, I don't want to say if it was a male or female. The student kept saying, "I don't know." What do you mean you don't know? The person kept saying, "I don't know." I said, instead of like accepting responsibility and saying, "I made a mistake, I shouldn't have," and no matter how hard I push, the answer was, "I don't know. I don't know how this happened." So these people are so deeply entrenched, or they just don't want to be honest with themselves. So they'll just keep saying, "But they're bombing Hezbollah," as if like in the ceasefire you can bomb Hezbollah, or in the ceasefire you can bomb Hamas or Islamic Jihad. They work. That's how they think. These narratives, though, are not being accepted anymore by young people. Young people have seen the reality. You cannot hide the reality from them. They're trying now, by the way, by shutting down TikTok and taking over the media even more than before. But in any case, they've seen what shouldn't have been seen. Babies torn into pieces every day. Israeli regime officials saying how they'll starve them, and how they did starve them, and how they continue to starve them. Nima, right now as we speak, they're starving in Gaza. They're very, very hungry. Kids are taking garbage and eating garbage because the food's not getting in. Why? Because the ceasefire is being violated. They're not just murdering people, but they're preventing food and equipment from getting in because they want to continue having kids die. They want to exterminate the Palestinian people. And Western journalists, Western media is not saying anything about it because they don't care. Because those people who work at BBC, they're stenographers. CNN, the same. The New York Times, The Guardian, they're all the same. They have no dignity, no honor. Otherwise, they'd be crying bloody murder day and night. But if something happens in Iran, if someone is beaten up, if someone is, I don't know, arrested, you know, just a couple of days ago, they condemned Iran um, for human rights violations again. Like, really, you're carrying out a genocide in Gaza? You're assisting the Israeli regime carry out a genocide, and Iran is the violator of human rights? They have no dignity or no honor, just like the governments don't have any dignity or honor. But people have woken up. Young Jews, this woman admits that young Jews don't accept their narratives anymore. And so her solution is to take away their cell phones until their final year at high school. Well, good luck with that.